Good day and semi-centennial to you. It's AMD's 50th birthday week and we're celebrating by retelling its story all the way from its founding up until today in a show that we call the Tequila Diaries. Can you just stop for just like 1 second? We haven't even got through the script. Alright, as you can see, we're celebrating the proper way with a whole bunch of booze. Expense tequila, actually. Expensive? No, expense tequila. Yeah, we're going to be steadily drinking throughout this epic poem, and I can already feel YouTube pulling the big demonetized lever over at HQ.
Not to worry, we'll have a good time anyways. And if you really want accuracy, then you can always head over to PCGamesN.com and read the full unintoxicated article that Jacob here published a couple of days ago, or drinks ago. I can't remember which.
Let's get to it.
So AMD is finally turning the big 5-0, and what a roller coaster of a half century it's been for the Silicon Valley startup. You may not know it from the company before you today, but it's not been an easy journey for old AMD.
No, rather it's been a perilous venture complete with highs, lows, and various lawsuits that have left this underdog teetering on the edge of collapse more than one time in its history.
Yeah, AMD's staff now numbers in the tens of thousands spread across the world in over 23 countries. But it all started in Silicon Valley, just a short hop away from the present-day headquarters of both Intel and Nvidia.
From the very beginning, AMD has been a company willing to dive headfirst into the next big thing, risking it all for a chance at the big bucks. But while AMD may come with a market cap of some $30 billion nowadays, it's still, as it has always been, an underdog.
Alright, so AMD was incorporated on May the 1st, 1969 by Jerry Sanders, or Colonel Sanders to his friends, along with a few loyal pans from Fairchild Semiconductor. Sanders, I mean seriously, look at the picture. I mean, it's either that or Tom Jones. Oh like latter day Tom Jones. It's like they had some weird chickeny love child. Or Fairchild Semiconductors.
Don't try to get back on track immediately after derailing it.
AMD was incorporated on May the 1st, 1969 by Jerry Sanders, along with a few loyal pals from Fairchild Semiconductor. Sanders had decided to go it alone and, whether he would ever admit it or not, walk in the footsteps of Intel co-founders Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore.
Sanders is an interesting guy. I did put was originally, but he is still going.
Very alive.
I'm very sorry, Sanders. Hector Ruiz, AMD CEO from 2002 to 2008, would later describe AMD's founder in his book as 6'2" and fit, with a shock of cotton white hair and a perfectly manicured beard. Sanders wore expensive suits, drove 2 Rolls Royces, owned a home in Beverly Hills, and worked out at the same gym as Sylvester Stallone.
But for all his eccentricities and egos, he was diabolically committed to chasing down business. And it wouldn't be long before AMD had corralled second source business with Fairchild and a few other important semiconductor manufacturers too.
It would also get to work producing its own logic and RAM chips.
But it wasn't until Intel launched the first commercial microprocessor, the 4004, in 1971, that AMD would start travelling down the road that would lead to where it is today.
Intel followed up on its initial successes with the Intel 8080 in 1974, and that's when AMD got to work reverse engineering Intel's efforts, lopping off the top of an Intel 8080 and figuring out what made it tick.
Yeah, that's where delidding first came from. Yeah. 1 year later, it had produced the AM9080, an unlicensed clone of Intel's chip.
With pressure from customers for second source suppliers, companies that are able to manufacture copies of first-party designs, Intel turned to AMD for help.
Yeah, not the first time. Well, it was the first time.
It was
not for the last time.
No, not for the last time. It was definitely the first time.
It was definitely the first time. So the two entered into a cross-licensing agreement, with AMD racked up some sweet business off the back of Intel's success.
By 1981, IBM was building the IBM personal computer, and it wanted Intel inside, although not that particular marketing slogan, because that wouldn't actually appear until 1991.
When did the do? I don't know, what was that? When did that appear?
1991, I can only assume.
Really? But there was one condition. It would only do so if Intel racked up a whole bunch of second source manufacturers. AMD was a prime candidate, along with 6 other companies that would also net the business, and it would enter a 10-year licensing agreement beginning in 1982, promising each company the right to sell products based on the other's designs, pending approval.
Intel now could sell to IBM, whose PC would sell so fast it would be described by the New York Times as so successful it surprised many people, including IBM itself. And AMD was able to pounce on a whole lot of extra business.
We've made this thing, it's really good. I didn't expect that. Do they really not? Did they really not expect it?
They didn't say it. IBM didn't say it.
Oh,
we made this PC. It was really cheap, and it was like $1,500 or something like that. And
Like
and like
1
2 years
megahertz.
earlier, we had charged, I don't know, like millions for
You're
the same
so
system.
making this just off of the top of your head. aren't
That's
you?
not. They charged so much more for like the equivalent of an IBM's computer. Beforehand, a big IBM computer would take this. It would be the size of a room. It would be like air conditioned to heck. It's a server, right? And
Like
they
a
charge
quantum PC
they would
right now.
Yeah, like a quantum PC right now. They would charge so much for it, and then they create the IBM PC, and then people could just buy them. And 1,500 is still a lot of money.
Yeah.
But people could buy them.
How surprising. So I'm just finishing some chips.
Really unprofessional.
Pretty dry pretzel.
It's unprofessional, really.
Oh.
It's just eating crisps.
In 1984, the love affair, if you can call it that, we are calling it that. It's a love affair.
Well, I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was like
I mean,
they had to do it.
It's pretty,
And AMD were the best.
salacious. Jerry Sanders, Gordon Moore, Robert Noyce.
Oh,
What they got up to in Silicon Valley stays in Silicon Valley.
eat more crisps.
In 1984, the love affair, if you can call it that, and we are, ended. Intel was reluctant to hand over any more of its secrets to AMD, and the companies would be dragged into a colossal tiff that still resonates between the two today.
By the mid-80s, the integrated circuit market was getting trickier, and Intel had decided to withhold the code for its third-generation x86 processor, the 8386, I totally said that wrong, from AMD in an attempt to maintain market dominance.
Okay, so there is precedent for them doing a 5-figure CPU code then?
Yeah, they totally did it. They
Oh,
did
that's
it before.
cool.
Yeah,
It's
they
like,
did the
8386, 8286.
8386, the 80, yeah, and then the 8486.
And now they're doing the 1090, 120K GF.
No, I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, but that move wouldn't hold off AMD forever, but it did throw a rather considerable spanner into the works. In order to keep orders flowing, the red team, or green team at the time, needed to reverse engineer every single Intel chip following the 386. And it wouldn't be until 1991 that AMD would actually be able to reverse engineer Intel's 1985 processor.
Similarly, it would take AMD until 1993 to create its clone of the 486, or 486.
The 486.
Four-
It's the 86, x86.
It's 486.
That Intel launched in 1989.
It's a 486.
It's the 486.
It's the 486. AMD would also work on its own chips during this time, with Sanders pledging the company to the so-called Liberty Chip program. In what would seem like a mortally impossible task today, AMD pledged itself to create a new chip every single week during 1986.
Every single week.
Like 52 new chips.
You imagine Intel, like they've been on the same architecture for years.
Yeah, how different were these chips?
Parts of what would become
Something much
So
bigger.
this week we're doing a new chip. What is it? It's got five
It's an adder.
It's got
It's-
5
yeah.
transistors in it. It's nothing
so
special.
it's not-
but yeah,
whatever.
It might work out. They probably had like Thanksgiving week. They probably did a bit of a shit chip.
Shit chip for Thanksgiving.
Just pushed it out. It's like
They didn't put that in
we're
the
gonna
press release.
we're gonna have a day off.
We're going to do so many chips this year and a shit chip for Thanksgiving.
It's like, when holiday times, like Christmas, you don't really want to put too much effort in. We'll just like farm that rubbish chip out. You know that idea we had? It's
Yeah.
like 23 transistors, it'll be all right.
AMD claimed the move was to free AMD from the tyranny of the commodity marketplace.
So tyrannical.
Yeah.
AMD's clone, the AM386, sold a hefty amount of
386.
units before the end of its first year, and subsequent clone chips performed admirably.
However, the process was long-winded. Intel's chips were increasingly complex, and realistically, this approach was impossible to pass as a business model going forward.
AMD would eventually win its legal dispute with Intel for the aforementioned code in 1996, but after that it was to go cold turkey. No more Intel blueprints and no more second source money.
With no more Intel code, AMD needed to get moving on its own R&D, and it wouldn't be long before it launched the K5.
Yeah, this was AMD's first in-house x86 processor, built from the ground up by its engineers and directly rivaling Intel's Pentium processors.
The K stood for Kryptonite, which, as you may have guessed, was a nod to taking down a seemingly unstoppable and superhuman Intel.
AMD would also acquire Next Gen at this time, hiring a small team of CPU boffins to create future chips for the company. Rebranding the team's in-house efforts and workshopping it to work with AMD's fabs, this team created the AMD K6, a chip capable of competing with Pentium and utilising motherboards designed for Intel processors.
Hector Ruiz, who would soon replace Sanders as CEO, joined the company in 2000, leaving a cushy exec role at Motorola. He would later remark in his book that when he joined AMD, it was financially worse for wear.
Yeah, as it turns out, Ruiz would later mention AMD, known as a chipmaker, was actually making up for massive losses in its microprocessor business on the success of its flash memory business.
But Ruiz was still confident in turning the company around into a profitable venture that could, against the odds, take on Intel. For one, Ruiz wasn't entirely convinced Intel ever wanted AMD out of the chip-making game to begin with.
Quote, "We had never seriously considered the prospect of bankruptcy. In a perverse way, Intel needed us. Intel would never allow AMD to go out of business, we reasoned. If we did, there would be no way to hide its size and the fact that it was a de facto monopoly. Intel would prefer to keep us as a weak competitor, always in the ring but with a bloody nose."
After success with the K7 in 1999, first of the Athlon name, and the successive Athlon XP, AMD would take the market by storm.
So K6 and K7, that was the Jim Keller stuff.
That was Jim Keller, yeah. He would then later come back and then do the whole Zen thing. So all their really good shit.
Yeah, so he did the Apple stuff as well, didn't he?
Yeah, so he did that, and they
the-
did to Tesla, but very briefly, and then went to
Don't
Intel.
talk about Tesla.
No, we don't talk about Tesla or Intel. The Athlon is so close. The Athlon 64 looks exactly the same as the Ryzen. 2001 AMD.
Good year, vintage.
Oh, it's sweet though, isn't it? It's exactly the same. Isn't that's kind of smart in a way. Like, I wonder if that saved the money in the sense of you're using the exact same thing across the board.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. There's a Ryzen in the plant pot, conveniently. But it is exactly the same. What is this? 2600, I can't break it.
No, don't fuck it, mate.
It's fine, it's an Athlon.
That was the marketing slogan for Intel.
It's fine, it's an Athlon. Oh, it's me. Whoa!
Fucking chip down. How's the 2600?
2600's gone. No, don't worry about it. With the K8 launch in 2003, AMD was riding high. This processor came equipped, with the company's own 64-bit extension to x86 called AMD 64 and integrated the memory controller into the chip itself.
Yeah, that move alone proved so successful that the Athlon 64, as the consumer chips would then be called, started to rule the processor market. Its Opteron server chips would also challenge Intel's finest in the enterprise sector.
This instruction set proved so valuable that Intel ended up licensing it from AMD, and they still do to this day.
And thanks to AMD's open platform management architecture, which led third parties to develop chipsets for its processors, even Nvidia was able to get in on Athlon's success, building its own chipsets for use with AMD silicon. Yes, Nvidia.
I know, even Jensen Huang wanted to get in on this. AMD would follow up this success with the first dual-core Opteron. I thought that was, yeah. In 2005. During this time, AMD's chips were the de facto standard for server performance, and major OEMs were starting to take notice. Dell, which held a massive share of the PC market, started buying up chips for its servers, even if AMD did have to sell them at a bargain price to make the sale.
It followed this up with the dual-core Athlon 64 X2 in the client space, and these chips would go head-to-head with Intel's Pentium D and the Pentium Extreme Edition.
But there was something afoot at AMD. While the company was successful, it required serious sales to maintain its operational costs. If its chip sales started crashing, it would be left financially crippled and unable to pay off the costs of its fabs. Foreboding. Foreboding. This is just, I want to make it very obvious. Foreboding. It's all bad.
You did say that.
Something's happening.
So we're not going to do the Jerry Sanders quote?
Oh.
We're not going to talk about that.
The real men have fabs. Yeah.
Like AMD had to have fabs, had to have fabrication places, because real men have that.
Yeah, that's just something that even though their own execs were saying, no, don't do this. This is financially a very bad decision to
utterly
have
crippling.
This much money being pumped into our manufacturing.
Well, they spent the AMD Dresden fab money before they actually had it in the accounts.
Yeah, it was a year. They were saying if you wait a year, you could totally have done this thing.
Yeah, the COO, Attic Raza, was just like, no, we can't do this yet. Wait a year. We'll have the money, build the fab, and it'll be good. And it screwed them for years. Absolutely years. Yeah.
They could have been, where could they have been now if they hadn't have had that policy?
Real men have fabs. And while all this is going on, AMD's burgeoning flash memory business is spun off into Expansion.
I know, it's a silly name. It's Expansion. That's what it's called. It's called Expansion.
Expansion. a co-owned subsidiary.
How are we going to
I
make
really tried. I really fucking tried there. That was,
that was
not
just a usual. That was, mate, hey, you could, any time of day he would have fucked that up.
expansion. A co-owned subsidiary with Fritzchens. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Back again we go. Here we go. We're going to get this one, guys.
And while all this is going on, AMD's burgeoning flash memory business is spun off into Spansion, a co-owned subsidiary with Fujitsu that would, in 2005, be divested to help AMD hone in on its microprocessor business.
And before we jump forward in time, 2005 was also the year that AMD launched a lawsuit against its rival Intel.
Yeah, AMD claimed that Intel was offering monetary rewards to manufacturers that snuffed AMD and its processors, specifically Japanese PC manufacturers. This wasn't settled until 2009, when AMD wasn't necessarily doing so well, and when Intel finally agreed to pay AMD $1.25 billion to settle all disputes. But that was a drop in the bucket by that point.
Yeah, I mean, Intel was doing very well. And
it was a quarter, wasn't it? It was like it's like their revenue.
It was less than a quarter, I think.
Yeah, of their revenue. It's like, oh, we'll fine you 1.2 billion, and they were like,
yeah, that's less than 3 months worth of our revenue. We don't care that this was years ago, whatever. But Intel wouldn't stay down for long. While its NetBurst architecture was a huge failure, efforts by a small team working on the leftovers of its old mobile architecture led to the Core architecture. You may have heard of it. Beginning with the Pentium M, Intel started rolling out Core everywhere and becoming something a little more threatening to AMD, which was the Core 2 Duo.
Yeah, the architecture would later find huge success in the desktop and server world, packaging 64-bit extensions from AMD, high clock speeds, and more cores. Intel would dominate the market once again with its latest chips, adopting the tick-tock development cycle to crush any resistance from AMD before it got off the ground.
Yeah, that was when TikTok was still around, and now it's process.
Node architecture,
optimization,
optimization.
We'll see where that gets to, but I don't know. Now there's some serious pressure on AMD to deliver. Remember, it wasn't all that long ago that it was floated entirely by a consistent bout of sales that, if they were to dry up all of a sudden, would leave AMD's finance department in a rather sticky situation. So what does AMD do as Intel comes back at it in the CPU market and cranks up the pressure?
It spends $5.4 billion on graphics experts ATI.
Yeah.
$5.4 billion.
It's a lot of money. ATI was how AMD's execs saw the future of the company, and Intel could package up everything that a customer wanted, graphics, processor, and memory, and AMD found that Intel's integrated graphics were its weak spot. Its Achilles heel, according to Ruiz.
It's a fair point. It's like they were pretty rubbish. But the deal net AMD the ability to compete with Intel on integrated graphics, and along with the foundations of what would become Radeon and AMD's semi-custom divisions, the PS4 and Xbox 360.
Yeah, that would all come around and make huge money for them.
Oh, and the Xbox One.
Yep, literally every console
and
that you
Xbox
play on
One
right
X.
now. It's, the amount of money
Not
that...
the Switch.
Not the Switch, that's
Not
still
the Switch.
Nvidia. That's still Nvidia. ATI was one of the most renowned graphics chip and chipset manufacturers going. The Canadian company had also acquired ArtX for itself fairly recently, who are the creators of the graphics chips within both the GameCube and the Wii, the GameCube being the best games console that's ever released.
That's a strong statement.
I'm telling you now.
But okay.
Nostalgia is everything.
It's like ATI,
nostalgia is everything.
ATI did great. Like they're the one.
Nostalgia is everything, and the GameCube was fantastic.
It was pretty good.
Star Fox Adventures was on the GameCube, therefore it was the best console.
But ATI wasn't always AMD's first pick, and rumor has it a deal to merge with Nvidia only fell through because Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang required he would become CEO of the merged companies once the deal was finalized. Since
AMD couldn't afford Nvidia outright to boot Huang out of the driver's seat, the deal quickly dissipated.
But the deal did go through with ATI. Unfortunately, coinciding with underperforming AMD processors and the company was starting to crumble under the financial pressure, even if AMD's CEO believes ATI sales were good enough to weather the storm, it wasn't looking too good for the good old red.
Ruiz had a solution to AMD's financial woes by 2007. In his words, why not sell them all of our factories?
Yeah, AMD had invested a lot of money in its fabs. Sanders had demanded as such in his tenure as CEO. But by the late 2000s, Ruiz and his cohorts had another plan in mind: ditch vertical integration, divest AMD's fabs, and drop their significant, overwhelming financial burden.
After all, ATI had ditched manufacturing and outsourced elsewhere, and it all worked out. Plus, Nvidia was having a good go at it, fabless too, and it meant AMD could stay ahead of the game without investing any more money in manufacturing.
Yeah, so a smart move, and $1 billion was certainly going to help out the company in its time of need, and it may have just found a buy-in Abu Dhabi investment company, Mubadala Development.
The deal had reportedly come about through a chance connection, and AMD was saved by a sheer coincidence.
So AMD sponsored the Ferrari Formula One team, as it still does today, and funnily enough, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi had also just bought a 5% share in the entire car manufacturer.
A couple of calls through some of their mutual contacts, reportedly Piero Ferrari, son of Enzo Ferrari, and AMD was meeting with VPs from Abu Dhabi to talk through the pitch to buy up all of AMD's fabs.
Yeah, all of them. The deal was critical to the company, and as Ruiz later put it, the survival of AMD was at stake.
The deal would be announced in 2008, immediately offloading $1.2 billion in debt to the new company and off of AMD's shoulders. Mubadala would end up with 19.3% stake in AMD as a result of the newly issued shares, and ATIC would pay AMD $700 million for a stake in the foundry company. It's a fitting name, right?
Yeah, fun fact, the deal would be announced just moments before the beginning of the 2008 financial crisis.
AMD left that deal with a financial burden lifted and the capability to fight another day, but there were stipulations for AMD's execs.
Yeah, Doug Gross would leave his role as AMD's VP of Manufacturing Operations to run the foundry company, and Hector Ruiz would also relinquish his position to chair it too. Dirk Mayer would continue as AMD's CEO and president, as he had been doing since 2008.
The foundry company would soon change its name to GlobalFoundries.
Yeah, catchy, eh?
And while all this is happening, ATI is busy developing the Terascale GPU architecture, complete with unified shader model.
Terrifying. Originally intended for the Xbox 360, it would also end up being mainlined into ATI's Radeon graphics cards. In 2009, AMD merges its GPU and CPU divisions into one. And shortly after, in 2010, it kills off the ATI brand completely and replaces it with AMD. I mean, it's a bit of a show. I liked ATI graphics cards. They were really good.
Yeah.
It's like I like some of AMD's graphics cards. Some of them.
You can't say that. You're
Yeah,
surrounded
I can
by...
totally say that. It's like the 570. 570 is awesome.
Yeah,
buy the 570.
not a Radeon 7.
If you're after a really good graphics card, buy a 570. Quality.
The Bulldozer years. Here we go.
This is all going to get horrible.
This is where it gets
Jim
bad.
Keller's gone. It's all fucked.
It's bad now.
Bad.
It's
These
all
are dark
bad.
times.
AMD decided to totally reset its CPU design process with Bulldozer in 2011, a fitting name for an architecture that destroys everything before it and begins again. However, the new design wasn't quite the fresh start for the company as it may have been hoping for.
Yeah, from Bulldozer to Piledriver and onto Excavator, AMD struggled to gain any traction outside of the entry-level market.
But the architecture was reasonably ahead of its time in many ways, shifting focus from speed and onto core count, a concept now adopted by both AMD and forcibly to Intel as well.
The market just wasn't ready, and due to the shared architectural design of Bulldozer, its multi-core chops came at a price. Cores shared restrictive resources, and instructions per clock, or IPC, remained stagnant while Intel ran away with performance.
The company's financial situation reached such dire straits that it ended up selling its own HQ in Austin, Texas, and then leasing it back for an immediate influx of much needed cash.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds crazy. I mean, but there was some salvation for AMD in the form of its APUs. The Bobcat architecture would find success later in life as it was molded into the Jaguar architecture.
This would be used within the PlayStation 4, the PS4 Pro, the Xbox One, the Xbox One X. AMD dominates the console market with its semi-custom unit, and you know who to thank for that? Lisa Su.
Yes, Dr. Lisa Su. She joined AMD in 2012, the same year that AMD created its semi-custom division, taking on the role of Senior VP and GM overseeing global business units and the COO before swiftly moving on to the role of President and CEO in 2014. Lisa Su was adamant that AMD needed to push beyond the PC market and into the embedded and console business. She's an engineer.
And no, Lisa Su isn't Jensen Huang's niece or long-lost cousin or any relation whatsoever. Su dismissed all of that as not true last year.
You don't have to do the air quotes. She just said it was not true.
She said it was not true. Yeah,
anyway.
but she said it. So.
I've got my microphone. Cool. The enterprise, embedded and semi-custom segment accounted for $433 million of AMD's revenue in Q4 2018. That's nearly half of the computing and graphics segment at $986 million, with a little help of Epic, of course.
Yeah, servers definitely helped that one out, but still pretty impressive. And while graphics had been under AMD's umbrella, during which time it released the Graphics Core Next architecture, this period would see AMD spin its graphics division out once again as the Radeon Technology Group, or RTG, headed by Raja Koduri.
RTG would gain autonomy in operation from...
Just ignore me. Just ignore me.
RTG...
Just ignore me.
I can feel your crunch. It's right there. RTG would gain autonomy in operation.
Just ignore me.
RTG would gain autonomy in operation from AMD's computing business and would later go on to produce Polaris. RTG would gain autonomy in operation from AMD.
I think we go with the first one, to be honest.
RTG would gain autonomy in
I'm trying to be as quiet as I can.
You're not though, are you? Because as quiet as you can would be not to crunch them.
I'm trying.
That would be as quiet as you can.
Okay.
RTG would gain autonomy.
Why is that such an issue? Just eat some chips.
RTG would gain autonomy in operation from AMD's computing business.
I'm just listening.
I'll tell you right now. I will tell you the facts of AMD's computing business.
I just want to know about RTG. I just want to know.
RTG would gain autonomy in operation from AMD's computing business and would later go on to produce Polaris in 2016 and Vega in 2017.
Cool.
August 2017. Yeah.
It was actually.
Knowledge, dropping knowledge on you, boy.
Yeah, you can buy them in August 2017.
Well, you could, but you'd have to spend 800 quid.
Yeah. It was a while until you could buy them.
Yeah. Since then, it has unofficially fallen back into line with the rest of AMD. Hence, it seems that the Red Team still hasn't quite made up its mind about this department's self-governance.
And Raja Koduri then swiftly kind of took a sabbatical after they launched Vega, which seemed convenient.
Oh, he just wanted to hang out with his family.
Yeah,
he just wanted to reconnect with his family, just spend some time with his family.
It was a big project.
Look at
things
things beyond hardware. I want to look at things
beyond. It wasn't that he was going to leave the company anytime soon.
He just wanted to look beyond
Absolutely not.
hardware, explore broader things,
and then go and work for Intel.
Oh, he went straight back into hardware.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. Wait, we finished this.
I know, it's good work.
This is it. And so we arrive at today. Well, nearly. Let's quickly dive back to 2012 when Jim Keller and his team started working on the Zen architecture. AMD set out to reset its processor development once again with Zen, starting fresh after many iterations of Bulldozer.
And suffice to say, it was a huge success. I can't suffice to say that. I can't suffice that.
It was.
Not immediately. It took a long while.
It takes a while to appreciate that AMD was a huge success at this point.
And suffice to say, it was fine. I don't think the first generation of Zen was a huge success.
It was a huge success.
I don't think it was a huge success.
It was a competitive architecture from AMD.
I don't think it was until the 2000 series that people actually really started. Proper AMD fans would be like, yeah, I'm going to buy Zen straight at the gate, 1000 series.
I think they made a lot of fans with the first 1000 series chips.
I think they made people consider it. But
that's such a huge deal for them.
No, considering it is fine, but I don't think those people actually bought it until the 2000 series when they actually proved they could do it again. I don't think it was an immediate success.
I do, yeah. Maybe I agree with you. Maybe I'm tainted by the momentum that they have now.
It was a qualified success.
For AMD, though, huge success. Compared to Bulldozer, huge success.
It was a qualified success.
It was a huge success for AMD.
Qualified success.
But a huge success for AMD.
We can have that argument on camera. Or we can not.
Or we can take that out to the street.
AMD surpassed its initial IPC goals with Zen, and the move to 14nm meant that AMD Ryzen CPUs could compete head-to-head with the... not really head-to-head.
Anyway, where were we?
Yeah, suffice to say that it was a huge success.
Was it a huge success? We can't do this again. We've done it so many times. Epic is also reigniting the race for server supremacy and following in the footsteps of Opteron all those years ago.
And after years of fighting lawsuits and antitrust battles, AMD finally managed to patch things up with Intel, teaming up to create the Kaby Lake G with both Intel CPU silicon and AMD Vega GPU tech. And they lived happily ever after.
Nah, the companies are still making snide remarks and poking fun at one another in marketing materials, and Intel never ceases to steal away AMD's long-standing employees at any given chance. But at least the days of major multi-billion-dollar lawsuits are over. For now.
Tensions are, if anything, rising between the two companies. With AMD Ryzen 3000 CPUs on the march, the Red Team will finally have process node superiority over its rival. These Ryzen 3rd Gen chips will be the first desktop processors built on the 7nm process node, and the revolutionary chiplet design of the AMD Zen 2 architecture.
And Intel is planning on pushing into the discrete GPU game, potentially posing a threat to both AMD and Nvidia's gaming and professional cards. Don't make fun of my gestures.
Discrete GPU. But RTG is hoping that AMD Navi later this year will keep the company right in the thick of it.
And after all that, AMD is still standing. You're not going to do the song this time?
Oh, sorry.
I'm still standing. Sure, it has often tied its own shoelaces together.
No, if you want that.
All right, no, we'll do it again, but we're going to do the song this time.
I'm just drunk enough for karaoke.
You didn't do the song again.
No.
Just do the song.
No.
Sing the song. Sing the song, man.
Right.
Sure, it has often tied its own shoelaces together and has been its own worst enemy at times. Please stop. But it's also shown its talents in adroitly adapting to the moment at hand, skirting financial pressure and against all odds, proving itself more than just a thorn in Intel's side.
AMD is one company that you love to see do well. After all, everybody loves an underdog story, but there's more to it than that. AMD has been pushing Intel and Nvidia, two companies that enjoy the IC industry's oligarchic rule, to create better processors, make better graphics chips, and stay competitive.
So there you have it. A mighty tale of silicon, innovation, and litigation.
We do so hope that you enjoyed today's video. And before you scream shill or favoritism, we will happily expense even more booze on PCGamesN Dime to make more of these videos on Intel, Nvidia, and just about anybody that springs to mind.
So give us a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that bell, and check back on PCGamesN.com for more of us, sober or otherwise, and more from the rest of the gang.
Yeah, thank you for watching, and happy 50th birthday for AMD.
Cheers!
Ding.
That's it. That's it, baby. We're done it.